Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, joined today, as always, by producer JT. We are brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, as well as the Broadway Sports Media Podcast Network. JT, how are you? How was your weekend? Are you ready to get back after it this week?
I'm so excited to get back at it. Taylor Swift weekend is finally done. Nashville can take a breath.
Our
Thank
great
God.
national nightmare is
Thank
over.
God we don't have to do that anymore.
No more
So,
closed streets. No more everybody in town just seemingly bending to the will of the Taylor Swift concert. Truly astonishing, the level of fame that she has. Like, you think of people like, John Mayer, for example, and it's like, oh, he's an A-list star. It's a big time guy. He can sell out a concert in any town. But like, he's selling out Bridgestone Arena at 25, 30,000 folks for one night. Taylor comes to town and can sell 70,000 tickets on 3 consecutive nights. That's a fifth of a million people that want to come see Taylor Swift when she comes to town, and she's doing that in every city. It's I don't get it. I mean, I don't think I'm capable physically of being that big a fan of anybody. I don't think I can love anybody in that way. Like, it's just, I don't know. Does it make any sense to you, or is there any sports star or music star or actor or actress that you can understand on that level of admiration?
I don't know anybody else who's gonna like pack the Nashville pedestrian bridge like that just to listen to her and not even let alone see her. But I mean, some of the clips this weekend were just so funny. Like, there's like people exiting. It was like the same clips of like January 6th where people were like helping each other up the wall of the Capitol. It's the same thing at the pedestrian bridge. They were like lined up and people were like grabbing each other onto the bridge to get back from Nissan. It was hilarious. And I was like, you know what? I don't, even if I was the biggest fan in the world, I don't think you could pay me enough money to navigate through that.
Is there any celebrity that you would pay $1,000 for a ticket to see?
I don't know. Like, maybe like my favorite artist or something. Like,
I was about to say, think of your favorite artist and then consider, okay, if you want to see them, it's going to cost you $1,000. I'm saying hard pass, man. I don't care. Like, I don't love anybody.
My favorite, yeah. I mean, I'm so close to saying yes on my favorite artist.
Okay,
like, I'm so close to paying $1,000 to go see Phoebe Bridgers. Like, okay,
I
don't know.
It's just funny because you got to see her for free.
I did
three times this week, and
well, 2, and then the rain canceled her. Last night,
it did. Yes. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Well, we appreciate everybody joining us live today. This has started off about as random as we've had a show start off, but we are live, and we appreciate those of you that are tuning in live. If you would not mind watching on the YouTube stream and not on Twitter, which, if you got to listen on Twitter, cool. But the YouTube stream is better, in my opinion, because that's where you can interact with us. We want you to be a part of the conversation. Like our guy D Good here, who, there we go. Sorry, JT. He says Swifties equals the January 6th mob, according to JT.
They probably could. Like, if every Taylor Swift fan.
Oh, if Taylor Swift fans had stormed they had stormed the Capitol, then it would have been an actual.
It would have been over.
The country would have actually been overthrown. Yeah. That would have been a real full blown insurrection. There would be no more United States. It would just be Taylor Swift running things. Which, speaking of a great national nightmare, we appreciate those of you tuning in live. If you want to be a part of the conversation, like D Good, go over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, and in the comment section of this live stream, that's where you can have your comments show up for us, and we can throw them up on the screen and we can chat back and forth today, JT. And I know anyone who's even vaguely familiar with this show is going to roll their eyes at this statement. Truly, we don't have a lot to talk about today. It's going to be a shorter show. It's just physically impossible unless I just read what's in our notes here like 3 times in a row and just repeat myself and go full TikTok loop mode. I don't think that we can make this show all that long, but we do have a couple of very interesting things to talk about. We're not doing the show just to do the show. We've got a number of interesting things to discuss. The main thing we're doing today, JT, if folks remember, I went and found the show before we started, January 9th, about just over 3 months ago now, I asked a series of questions to my followers on Twitter. I basically tried to come up with every single offseason Titans question that I believed needed answering. And it was really half an exercise in trying to predict the future and seeing who is right and who is wrong, but really also half an exercise in demonstrating just how little we know and how much changes over the offseason in the NFL. And it's not over. And there are a couple of these questions that we don't have an answer to yet. It's something that we may get an answer to in August and September. It may be something that we don't truly know the consequences of or the correct answer to until we see what happens when the players are actually out there this fall. But there are a couple of things that I think post-draft would be wise for us to check back in on and see just how much our perspectives have changed, how much our opinions have changed, just how right or how wrong folks were back in January about the direction of this team. I think it's a fascinating exercise. And yeah, Jacob, one of the horsemen of the hot read apocalypse, clearly understanding of whenever Easton says it's going to be a short show, we're going to go 3 hours. D Good points out we could talk about just how bad the Mets are. I'm going to spare JT that.
We don't have to.
Season opportunities for us to make fun of the Mets in the future. Let's start with the warm-up today, JT. And the warm-up is a little bit off the board, but it's an AFC South topic that I've seen talked. This is not new by any means, but it's been talked about quite a bit ever since the draft happened. Really, it's not, people have not stopped talking about it, including the team in question. And the team in question is the Houston Texans. There's been a lot floating around about just how much the Texans spent to get the third overall pick in the draft and get to pick the second and the third picks consecutively. And the logical leaps made by some trying to use different mathematic commutative properties with the cost of these two players at different positions, a very different positional value, obviously, because there's a quarterback involved. I'm here to clear the air a little bit because I think both sides of this argument are missing something. And while one is right, even the right side isn't quite understanding the logical fallacy going on here. So a lot of folks in Houston Texans camps, and this is really kind of a narrative being spun by the Texans organization, one would imagine, because we're still talking about it. They seem very intent as a company, as an organization, as a franchise to get this out there and make it clear, whether it's little man syndrome or them having a little bit of maybe buyer's remorse, a little subconscious regret or concern that they're going to regret the decision, trying to really create a soft landing for themselves if things don't go to plan with these two players. But of course, the Texans go with CJ Stroud at 2 overall, right? They take the second quarterback off the board, the guy that they claim was their quarterback all along. We're not going to get into that. And then at 3, they trade back up with the Cardinals. They go from 11 overall to 3 overall to take the next pick off the board, a consecutive player for them. And they get the edge rusher that many had expected them to be interested in, Will Anderson Jr. out of Alabama. With those two players on the team, first of all, two great players that if both pan out the way that Houston hopes, and they both can become cornerstones of each side of the ball on that team, it's not going to matter what they paid. Nobody's going to care. An example of this, the big question here is, well, they moved up for a non-quarterback. They spent a lot of very precious, valuable capital. They potentially gave away the first or second overall pick in next year's draft to the Cardinals in exchange for this third overall pick, among other things that they traded. It's not going to matter that they gave up that excess value for a non-quarterback if he has the impact that he has. I saw somebody, I think it was one of the PFF guys, or maybe Eric Eager or somebody on Twitter talking about this. And it was a chart of the capital spent to move up into the top, I think it was top 3 or top 5 overall in the draft. And then who those players were, charting the EPA brought to their team, the extra juice those players brought to their team as a result of being on the team, right? And the one non-quarterback that you look at in the recent memory of these trades is Julio Jones. The Falcons gave up, I think it was in the last 15 or 20 years, the most excess value in that trade to go and get Julio Jones. And guess what? Since that draft night, you've never heard about it again because Julio Jones turned into Julio Jones, a future Hall of Famer. And so nobody cares, right? So really, if you get it right, that erases all wrongs. But from a pure valuation standpoint, a good process standpoint, it's fair to look back on these types of trades and wonder, what exactly was the rationale here? Why exactly did they do this? What did they pay? What the Texans have been doing, JT, is essentially trying to argue that they really traded for that third pick at a quarterback price because they were trading for a quarterback. So their mental math goes like this. We knew that there were a handful of teams interested in moving up to the third overall pick for CJ Stroud if he was there, one of which being the Titans in our own division. We wanted Stroud, and we also wanted a star defensive cornerstone to put on our defense. We wanted both. We wanted to have our cake and eat it too. And the reason that we drafted them in the order that we did was because if we had gone Will Anderson at 2 and then gone for CJ Stroud at 3, we didn't have the third pick yet. And with CJ Stroud available at 3, they would have to be competing in an auction for that pick. The Cardinals selling it to a number of teams wanting it, the Texans, the Titans, among others included. And that would have, supply and demand, basic supply and demand. The price would have been inflated. So they were trying to save themselves the competition, save themselves the capital cost of going back up to 3 to get CJ Stroud at 3 by taking him off the board at 2. And they were basically assuming that the competition for that third overall pick, and thus the price for that third overall pick, would be greatly reduced when it was Will Anderson available at 3 and not CJ Stroud. So that's their argument, is that we drafted them in a funny order in order to eliminate competition. But the value we gave up in the capital we traded to move from 11 to 3 to get Will Anderson Jr. was equivalent to trading for a quarterback. And that's okay because we got our quarterback. So you can in your brain, you can say they flip-flopped and really they traded up for a quarterback and not an edge. Because if you give up that capital to move up for an edge at 3 overall, he's one of those Julio Jones situations where you're going to be clowned for this move unless they turn into a perennial Pro Bowler, perennial All-Pro, potential future Hall of Famer, 10-year starter, a star stud, top 5 overall player. The pushback on this from many, and the people pushing back on this are the ones that are correct, but they're missing something here. I'm seeing a lot of, I just don't understand how anybody is buying what the Texans are trying to spin here. This is clearly a spin zone situation. This is the Texans organization trying to cope with the fact that they grossly overpaid to move up to 3 for an edge defender because they wanted their cake and they wanted to eat it too. And, whether it was the GM and the new head coach butting heads on how they should build philosophically, whether it was D'Amico Ryan simply having a lot of power in that new organization and demanding he get his guy in Will Anderson, whatever it may be, the argument is they can say all they want. They moved up for a quarterback. Clearly they didn't. And so clearly they greatly overpaid. A response from a guy that we love and respect, for example, today, Mike Herndon, our guy, friend of the show, he quote tweeted this tweet from Michael Salfino, who I'm not familiar with, but he was saying this, we really traded for quarterback at 3 discussion from the Texans that people are buying into is nonsense. They had the quarterback already. They did not trade for him. They traded for Will Anderson, period. End of sentence. Live with it. The fact that the Texans are desperately spinning this is telling. I think there's some truth to that. Mike's response, the quote tweet of that tweet was 100% this. If the Titans dropped their offer when Stroud came off the board, as multiple reports have indicated now, that would mean the Texans were bidding either against themselves or other teams targeting Anderson at the end. More likely the former, in my opinion. So what folks who are pushing back on this are failing to understand, or seemingly failing to understand, because they talk about it like, I don't understand how anyone could fall for this. On the surface, it makes sense logically. Now, unfortunately, when you think about it for a second, you realize it's a logical fallacy, but that's what a logical fallacy is, right? They don't, if they weren't pitfalls that were easy to accidentally fall into, they wouldn't be fallacies. The fallacy here is that the Texans had to move up for Anderson in the first place, right? And so what they ended up doing, and what folks who are pushing back on this and who are ultimately correct are missing, is that the Texans are trying to spin, and they either are doing this despite the fact that they understand it's a logical fallacy, or maybe, people know I think this organization sucks besides their head coach. I think that they're very poorly run. They may just be foolish and dumb enough to believe this themselves, to have deluded themselves into this idea. But what they are pushing, whether they believe it or not, is that we had to pick them in this order to reduce the price. But ultimately, the price we paid was worth it because it was to move up to get our quarterback and the edge defender. We would not have gotten both if we hadn't paid that price, and included in both is a quarterback. So we paid for a quarterback, right? I don't know off the top of my head what they ended up trading to move up there, but among those picks was what will likely be a top 10, top 5, top 3 pick in next year's draft overall, a first overall pick, their first overall pick next year, among other things, to move back or to move up from 11 to 3. That is not hard to understand, JT. Like I get how they are trying to circle that square. Like I mentioned a moment ago, the fallacy here is that you had to get Anderson in the first place. Now, if the point is the Texans first, like if you told me the Texans for some reason had to come away with both, then what they did is, yeah, they paid the price for a quarterback and came away with a quarterback and an edge player. They drafted them in the correct, wise order to limit the price as much as possible. But what they're failing to understand here is nobody made you go get Will Anderson to 3. No, the Texans war room is the one who decided that was a part of the must. That was an option that you had. You did not have to go and pay that. The reason you did is because you were just so unbelievably horny for this edge defender who, I get it, Will Anderson. He's going to be a really good player. I think he was one of the top 5 talents in this draft. I get it. But I mean, how many times, JT, I mean, at every position, you could be like, hey, fan of the Bears, who did you really want at 9 overall? I would have loved Jalen Carter, but I love that we got a tackle too, because we got to defend our new quarterback. And I wouldn't mind a weapon here too, Bijan, if he's still on the board. Like, guess what? Every team has like 4 or 5 or 12 guys that might be available at their position that they wish they could get. But there's a reason the saying goes, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want to, you have to grossly overpay. And that's what the Texans did. They have deluded themselves into believing they had to get both, when in reality, nobody forced them to do that. No one at all. And so they went and they did it. They paid the price. We're all going to collectively respect it if it works out for them. But if it doesn't, they deserve to be clowned, unlike the spin they're trying to put on it now that, hey, we paid for a quarterback, so even if it doesn't work, you got to take a swing sometimes. No, you didn't, but you paid for an edge defender at a quarterback rate, and you got a discount quarterback rate because you took the quarterback first. That's the long and short of it. So, JT, I don't know. Did we have anybody tuning in on this rant of mine at all in the comments, or should we just move on? I've seen plenty of folks chiming in here. Should we get? I
mean, besides Decould saying, and we thought Jim Irsay was the druggie. Like, I feel like
we don't think that. We know that, by the way. That part's a fact.
And then Jacob says, literally any receiving option would have been there at 12, which
yep.
I agree. Now knowing what we know, I remember saying this, and we can move on after this. I remember saying this on draft night. I was like, when they took CJ Stroud, I think we were having a conversation of like, this was definitely more of the owner superseding D'Amico Ryan and
the
GM and getting what he wanted, and the present that he gave him in exchange for saying, I'm going to do what I want it to, is like, I'm okay with you using the capital to go get your guy.
And that may have been the compromise. Yeah.
It may have been the compromise here, but still, just even putting it like that way, it's like, what a terribly bad way to run your franchise. Like, if you're not going to put the faith in your GM and new head coach, probably your best head coach you've had maybe in a decade.
I mean, most promising guy since before. I forget who was before Billy O'Brien, but I mean, that's the last guy that was any good.
But it's just kind of crazy. But we'll see if it works out for them.
We will. All right, that's the warm up for today. We've got a couple of Titans news items to get to, JT. So without further ado, here is producer JT with the news.
Yeah, let's jump in here. And the Titans have officially announced that they hired former Falcons college scouting director Anthony Robinson as their assistant GM. We talked about this on the show last week, how it's kind of being split up between Anthony Robertson and Chad Brinker. They both will be in assistant GM positions, whereas Robinson will be seeing the scouting department, and Chad Brinker will oversee football operations. So kind of that split and divide and conquer is what Rand Carthen is going for.
Yeah, and I completely forgot about this, so I just pulled this up. I got an email about 30 minutes ago from Titans PR. This is their official press release on the subject, so might as well read it. They said the Tennessee Titans have hired Anthony Robinson as assistant general manager. He joins the Titans after 15 years with the Atlanta Falcons, most recently as their director of college scouting. In his role with the Titans, Robinson will oversee the scouting staff, both college and pro. Robinson was the Falcons' director of college scouting for 4 years since 2019. Last year, the Falcons' 2022 draft class produced the team's leading receiver in first-round selection, Drake London, their leading rusher in fifth-round selection, Tyler Algier, and their fifth-ranked tackler in second-round selection, Troy Anderson. During his 15 years with the Falcons, they earned 6 playoff appearances, 3 division titles, and 1 NFC championship. Not bad record from a team building standpoint. Prior to becoming the Falcons director of college scouting, Robinson spent 8 years, 2011 to 2018, as a regional college scout, first in the Northeast region, then over the eastern half of the United States. He originally joined the Falcons as a scouting assistant in 2008, a role he held for 3 years. Additionally, Robinson spent 2 years in 2007 and 2008 as a scouting assistant intern with Blesto Scouting, 2 years in 2005 to 2006 as an undergrad assistant coach of the wide receivers at Florida State, and 1 year in 2006 as an intern in the player personnel department for the Baltimore Ravens. A native of Tallahassee, Florida, Robinson began his college career as a running back at Morgan State before transferring to Florida State, where he earned his degree in sports management. So certainly a guy with some serious pedigree, JT, and somebody that, if his track record with the Falcons in terms of their draft strategy, their drafting prowess over the last half decade or so is any indication of what he's going to be able to do here for the Titans, a very, very nice ad and exactly the kind of guy that you would like to see take over running the scouting department.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely a good idea to bring in him with this prowess. They've kind of been, it's kind of funny, the Falcons front office staff to Titans position pipeline grows stronger now, adding not
Titans
just him, but also
players.
Charles London.
The Falcons send the Titans coaches and personnel. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so much fun. You know, it was even more fun though today.
What?
The schedule conundrum and just everything that was going on
in real
today.
Flux there for a minute. Yeah,
it really was. So this morning it was reported that the NFL hoped to have its regular season schedule announced on Thursday, but there's a chance that it may not be ready and could be delayed. Per Peter King, the schedule makers are expected to meet with Roger Goodell later today. More clarity expected after that.
You know what? Did you just get this notification?
Which one?
I literally just got a notification on this very topic. According to ESPN, the NFL will release the 2023 regular season schedule on Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 7 p.m. Central. So there we go.
So I was about to say,
okay, so
right after that.
Did we already have that news? I'm sorry.
We already didn't. I was about to get to that. But
I stole your thunder. Let's pretend JT said that. I'm so sorry.
But however, it has been resolved and it will be announced on Thursday. So of course it's announced Thursday.
Man,
I wonder what we're going to be talking about on Friday.
I wonder what Friday's show will be on. Yes.
It's almost perfect. Finally, the NFL is giving us news in a perfect time frame so that we can actually record a show on it, like when it comes out, and give our reactions. It's great.
Yeah,
but
there are one time all year that we're gonna get it. The rest
there
is
are some interesting changes to the schedule this season. This was tweeted out by Adam Schefter earlier today. The NFL will have a Black Friday game for the first time ever this season. So
for Amazon Prime, I'm guessing
probably
it's probably an Amazon game.
I would assume.
Yeah.
Games don't necessarily belong to networks anymore. All games are free agents, which is very interesting.
So the league can pick and choose where the games land in terms of the network.
It seems like that is how it is going to work.
Yeah.
Something that we already talked about way back in the general the GM meetings. Teams can be on Thursday Night Football now twice. Of course, there's their own rules and regulations with how much rest you have that goes into that. But I'm interested to see how that works.
I believe you still can't have 2 short weeks, which is clear.
Yes.
I think justified by fewer than 5 days of rest. So if you have 2 Thursday night games, it's going to be like right before a bye or something.
And then not all teams are guaranteed to have a primetime spot anymore. So very interesting.
Which is funny because there were teams before that did we made a whole stink about this around this time last year that the Lions had 0 primetime appearances. So
yeah, right. And then of course,
what do you mean? Are we just making that official now? Like we're making it clear that some of you will in fact not have a primetime spot?
It sure seems like that. But some interesting changes that will be coming this season, especially that free agent. I'm very interested to see how they now are able to maybe mix around the schedule to make some of the more boring, like 4 o'clock hour, maybe be a little more entertaining.
Well, yeah, and I'm curious what the intent behind that is. I'm sure it has something to do with making the product more enjoyable as the season goes on, avoiding real stinkers being forced on people when there's an amazing game going on that they can't see. I'm guessing, and this is all, I'm just hearing this for the first time, so I could be perfectly wrong on this. I wonder if it's like, sometimes in the afternoon, there's a week 15 afternoon game where on Fox there's 2 afternoon games and it's split half the country and half the country. Maybe the idea is if they're both on Fox and Fox has to split it up regionally and one of the games absolutely stinks, we take the good game away from Fox and give it to a network that's going to put it on nationally for everybody so that, the people in Tennessee and east of the Mississippi aren't forced to watch Jets Browns week 15 when you've got Chargers Chiefs week 15 and both of those teams have 9 or 10 wins already, and it's like this is a mega fight that everybody wants to tune into. Maybe that's the idea, or maybe it's bumping stuff in and out of prime time. But I do like that. I mean, we're getting closer and closer to, I think, them finally figuring out the best way to avoid those just everybody hates it. Why is this happening to us in week 16? Please don't give us Commanders Saints. Like, I'm begging you. That's what they're doing. On the other topic that you just mentioned, who's the odds-on favorite team to not get a primetime game this year? It's got to be the Cardinals, right?
Probably. I would think so.
Who besides the Cardinals could not get a game?
I mean, a Tom Brady-less Bucks.
Oh, yeah. The
Maybe.
Buccaneers.
I'm trying to think of other teams that like might not have a really strong narrative ever, like this entire season.
If the Rams fall apart again, if Stafford is not playing and Cooper Kupp is not playing, there's a decent.
I would say like half the AFC South, but like everyone's got a young quarterback now, and like
they'll want to feature those guys.
You got to feature them, but besides that, I mean, the Cardinals and the Bucks are going to have a hard shot. Well, I don't know. Do the Buccaneers have a London game this year or something like that? Maybe.
Oh, are they playing it? They may be one of the Germany teams. I feel like they do. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't count as prime time though. I don't think. But still, okay. So that's interesting, and we will make Friday's show on. I was talking to, I don't know if it was you or somebody else the other day about this. Of all the things during the year that there's a section of folks in sports that love it and that they hate it. Like you get around to mock draft season and people are either, oh, I love mock draft season, or they're like, please turn it off. I'll make it stop. This is my least favorite thing in the world. There's a lot of strong opinions on schedule release. There's a lot of folks out there that just think it's dumb. I know our buddy Zach Lyons thinks schedule release, fodder is dumb. Discussion is dumb. I couldn't disagree more. I nerd out over the schedule big time, partially because I find the logistics work well with my brain. So I find it interesting, but also, JT, I'm a firm believer in the idea that the way that your schedule falls, depending on who you are as a team, where you're at, there's a million different variables involved. But the way your schedule comes out of the machine that the NFL puts it into and it spits out the ideal schedule for them, how exactly those games fall on the schedule for you absolutely dictates how your season can go. And I think can truly be the thing that swings an entire season. A couple of examples. The Colts last year, they're going into a 3rd or 4th consecutive season with a new quarterback to start the year. So that's, whenever a team is coming into a year with a brand new quarterback, even though they're, a seasoned veteran like Matt Ryan, you're expecting there to be some turbulence. You're expecting it to be like Tampa Bay with Tom Brady in that first year where they're 7-5 at the bye, and then they don't lose again. They go on to win the Super Bowl, right? It's what we're probably going to see with Aaron Rodgers this year with the Jets. They usually aren't going to be all pistons firing week 1. But by week 8 or 9, things are working out well. The Colts get 5 of their 6 divisional games in the first 7 or 8 games last year. So they got royally screwed on that front, and that's why their season was essentially over by the midway point, because they had like a 1-5 division record, 2-4 division record, and we hadn't even gotten to the midway point of the season. There are other examples of teams getting absolutely just destroyed. I know that the Jets last season, or excuse me, the season before last year, there was a lot of talk about how, holy cow, the first, 7 of the first 8 games they play are against playoff teams, and then it gets easier at the end. And I believe that was This may have been the season that they had Zach Wilson as a rookie, or it may have been the year that they accidentally won a really easy game at the end of the year and cost themselves Trevor Lawrence. I want to say it may have been that one. The point is, where you have your hard games fall, who you have right before or right after you come off of the bye, who you have coming right off of their bye, who you have, coming off of a London game, or do you happen to have a 3-game road stretch? Are you going to have a long road trip in the middle of the year? Do you have a 3-game homestand in the hardest portion of the year? Like, these factors matter a ton, man. Your net added or lost rest over the year, your rest differential is a big deal. Just how many more days of rest you have than your opponents in total. That is proven to be a rather predictive element of team success. So we're going to nerd out hard on it. We're going to examine every nook and cranny of the Titans schedule, of the other AFC South team schedules, any other notable schedules in the division or in the league. That's what Friday's show is going to be on. And then I don't quite know. We're doing our show with Danny Kelly to wrap up the draft. It's either going to come out this week or be the Monday show next week. We're going to record it at some point this week. If we do, it may be on Wednesday or Thursday that it comes out. We may just not be able to sit on it and have it come out and have a 3-show week. If not, it'll be Monday's show. But I believe for the time being, JT, we are going to be moving tentatively to a 2-show schedule, probably for the rest of May, maybe into June, as we still have a good bit to talk about. You got schedule release. We're going to do a series on each of the Titans' new rookies with a number of guests and insight that I don't think you're going to find anywhere else. That'll be great. We're going to be doing a good bit of talking this weekend. I'll be at Titans facility covering rookie minicamp. Get to see these rookies in action. I'll have, clips and get to speak to them, and we'll break all of that down next week as well. We've got OTAs, mandatory and unmandatory, coming up out, just outside training activities here, which I believe are the beginning of June. So we'll talk about that then. And then about halfway through June, we'll probably go to 1 show a week for 5 or 6 weeks, pick it back up with 2 shows or 3 shows at the end of July as we get into training camp and get ready to rock and roll and run it back. So we've got plenty of content planned. There's going to be a lot of very interesting shows. We've got some off the wall guests that I have tentatively lined up for the dead period of the summer that we will still be very interesting. And I think maybe some more human interest, maybe some more discussion with folks that you find really interesting that you would love to hear from. All of that coming up. Let's get to these last couple things of the Titans news, and then we can move on to the update on our poll questions from earlier in the season.
So the last thing in news here, of course, is, and the most important, because everything with this man is just so important and so volatile. And it's
everybody listening, so make sure Zach Lyons has heard about this, because this is the kind of thing that making sure to just lose our minds over the number that a player is going to wear is like a top 5 important thing on his list. So make sure that you text him about it. Yeah.
So Will Levis tweeted now 2 days ago that it was always number 8.
It was always 8. That's all he said. So very cryptic.
The picture that he had with his Nashville Predators jersey was number 8. So a lot of stuff saying number 8, and then he goes out and tweets this.
But hang on. At the time, it was just that tweet, and he waited a while to clarify.
Yep. And he
said the confusion was it came just seconds after the Derby winner, number 6, or excuse me, number 8.
Yes.
So that was everybody's like, what is he talking? Did he just
a lot of money on him? But
I'm very sorry, but Mage wins number 8. Is he celebrating a big win of the Derby bet, or is he going to be number 8? And so he goes on to clarify. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, he goes on to clarify in 2 tweets here saying, referencing the Derby winner. So, okay. So gotcha. Never mind. And then replies once again, and my jersey number.
And the old double switcheroo, the old double head fake. You got to respect it. Yeah. No, so, I think that's funny. I still don't know if he's I still don't know if it's a bit. As far as I know, there's no confirmation. We'll probably find out this weekend at the very least about what jersey he's going to be wearing. I think it's 8. I don't know. Do you think he's being serious? I think that he is.
I think so. I think it was an.
It'd be even funnier if it was a triple head fake, and it's just psych. No, I was joking the whole
time. What do you think about it? Are you cool with Will Levis wearing?
I don't really. I mean, I care. The only time that I care is when you have a guy like, was it Jake Haener down in New Orleans, comes in and immediately scoops up Drew Brees' old number, and you're like, buddy, calm down. That number is about to get.
I think that was ended up being a thing that his college put out saying.
Oh, was it not real? Okay.
No, because Jake Haener wore number 9 in college, and then
I thought that was
his
an announcement of
college
what
was
he was
like,
wearing in the
yeah, no,
NFL.
I
And I'm
don't
like,
think
they
so.
let him do that? And also, he thought that was a good idea. And
Yeah,
also, they
right.
haven't retired that number yet. What are we doing in New Orleans, man?
No
Okay,
idea.
that makes some more sense.
But that's gonna do it for our Titans news here.
Well, hang on.
Yeah. Okay.
I sidetracked us totally again. Shocker. My opinions on this are other than when a guy takes a legendary number or a number that is like, cursed. Like if you're the guy that came after Jake Locker and you go with Jake Locker's number, it's like, let's avoid that number for a little bit. It's got some bad juju on it. I'm not a huge fan of what is going on with that number. Everyone thinks of 8 as, that's Marcus Mariota's number. So it's like, there's some bad blood, some bad memories with number 8, but Will Levis looks nothing like Marcus Mariota. So there's not going to be any confusion there. You should be thanking him because all of your useless number 8 jerseys out there, you can just slap the old tape name on the back and you're rocking and rolling.
There you go.
And I think of the available numbers, it's the most quarterbacky number for me. Are you somebody that has a strong opinion on like what quarterbacks should and shouldn't wear in terms of numbers?
Not really. I think 8 is probably one of the ones that looks a lot better. I don't know, maybe like a 14 or a 17. Probably. I think I like a single digit better on like. I think it also has to do with the person. Like if they've worn a single digit.
Is it weird that I like mobile quarterbacks with single digits, but if you're a pocket passer, I want you to have double digits? Does that make any sense to you, or is that just my brain?
Maybe a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that's just your brain being.
Well, doesn't Jalen Hurts wear like a 1, or Kyler Murray wears? I think Kyler Murray wears a single digit, and then you got like TB12. You got Aaron Rodgers also 12.
Yes.
I'm trying to think. Ryan Tannehill 17. Jimmy Garoppolo is a double digit guy. Like that. That's kind of, maybe that's just the way that I am accustomed to it being. Maybe. But like with Will Levis, I think 8 is fair. You're on the spectrum of rushing versus not rushing.
You're getting close. You're getting close.
I know. He had 19 available to him, which I thought would have been a great pick simply because it's a gross number and everybody would have hated that number. You lean into the villain narrative. I would have been a fan of that as well. But he goes with 8. So that's, we've spent roughly 4 more minutes than we should have on number fodder, so we can move on now. Is that it for news today?
Yeah, that's gonna do it for today.
All right. That is producer JT with the news. Last bit today, and it is the main bit, but we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. We had these polls that I put out. Again, I think it was January 8th or something. We talked about it on the January 9th episode of this show. 10 questions I asked in polls on Twitter, got roughly 700, 800, 900 votes on each. So a great sample size of you all. Thank you to all that participated in that poll back in January. The idea of this exercise was, one, to identify the questions that we had about this team that we're hoping to have answered in the offseason. Number 2, demonstrate just how hard it is to predict what's going to happen in the offseason and show just how much things change in a couple of months in terms of a team's composition, the way that we perceive a team, the opinions we have about how a team should or shouldn't operate. A lot changes based on free agency, trades, the draft, injuries, hirings, firings, all of these things. And then number 3 was just to see, how well can we predict the future? It's always fun to try to, see just how well we do. So JT, we have those slides we can show. For those of you that are just listening, definitely go over to YouTube, Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, so you can see our beautiful faces, as well as our poll questions about to throw up here. JT, what was the first question that I asked? And I put this slideshow together intentionally trying to kind of avoid looking at the questions. So we're both reacting, I think, to these results in real time 3 months later. Let's see how crazily wrong we were.
So, starting us off here, the first question was the Titans 2023 quarterback situation should be blank. And the winner of this one was one more year of Tannehill with 53.7% of the vote. The second place was draft a QB with 21.8% of the vote. And then veteran QB / free agent, 11.5%, and Dobbs / Willis / other, 13%.
Right. So it clearly, even at the time, the majority of folks believed that one more year of Tannehill was the correct way to go. The folks that wanted to draft a quarterback, guess what? You got what you wanted as well. So roughly 75% of you, congratulations. I don't think this one was all that crazy. I mean, I tweeted after the regular season ended that, like, I can't wait for us to do this whole song and dance about who's going to replace Tannehill this year, just for Tannehill to be the starter in August, which I still believe he's going to be. And so, yeah, they drafted a quarterback. They also are going to go with at least one more year of Ryan Tannehill. So well done on that question. But the next question is the sister to this one. This one was, what should it be? Now, we asked people what it will be.
Yeah. So for this one, the Titans 2023 quarterback situation will be the majority of the vote here. 74.4% of the vote said one more year of Tannehill.
Mm-hmm.
And then each of these other options got less than 10%.
Right. The least chosen option was draft a quarterback. Only 7.5% of the 853 voters said that that's what it will be. Clearly, nobody had any faith that the Titans would be drafting a quarterback. They did. Now, if you told people at the time, they do draft a quarterback and they do get one of the top 4 guys, and they do it at 33 overall, you'd have been like, what? How did we get to that point? But they did it nonetheless. So again, people, I think, nailed it here, besides the fact that they clearly underrated, and myself as well. I would not have told you at the time that the odds of the Titans going and drafting a quarterback were high at all. My opinion on whether they should or not was a little bit different at the time. Clearly, things have changed.
Let's move on here to the third question, which was, if the Titans draft a quarterback in the 2023 draft, your preference is blank. 48.6% of the vote was Bryce Young. 36.1% of the vote was CJ Stroud. In third place, 9.8% of the vote was Hendon Hooker / Anthony Richardson / other.
Where's Will Levis?
And then coming in fourth with only 5.4% of the almost 850 votes was Will Levis.
Ooh, that's tough. That's tough.
Yes.
So only roughly 40 of you said that Will Levis is who your preference would be for quarterback at the time. I think that people have changed their opinions on him a little bit. I think that people, I don't know, if I ran this poll today, it would probably still be roughly the same. I think that enough people would say Will Levis over Hooker or Richardson other option, just because of the way that people's opinions have changed, whether it's objective or subjective. But this one's not surprising to me, and I think that it's roughly still the same sentiment, JT.
I think it would have been interesting if we ran it about a month out when Bryce Young was pretty much the consensus QB1.
I shouldn't have put him on here. You're right. Yeah.
And then, well, at the time, it was between CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. It was
totally.
CJ Stroud.
Well, and the first overall pick was still for sale at the time. I mean, if the Titans really wanted Young, they could have gotten it.
They could have gotten it, but it would have been interesting to see between Stroud, Levis, Richardson as his own option, and then
Stroud,
Hooker
Levis, Richardson,
other.
Hooker. Right.
Yeah.
Hooker. And then Hooker would have gotten more votes than Levis, and it'd have been like,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we can move on to the next question.
The next question here is, if the Titans don't go quarterback in the first round, they should draft a blank. 82.5% back in January out of the 900 votes here said offensive tackle. In second place, 15.5% was wide receiver. Only 1.1% had cornerback. In the last option here, with only 0.9% of the vote, was other.
So again, at the time, I didn't even include quarterback in their first round draft options. I guess I should have. Tackle was the clear and obvious choice. At the time, the taste in everybody's mouth was still very, very bitter as to how unbearable this offense was to watch with the level of offensive line play. I mean, this was the end of the year when you had Nate Davis, Ben Jones, and Taylor Lewan all out of the rotation. And so it was just a nightmare situation in there. As to whether or not they got their wish depends on who you ask. If you asked me, the answer is maybe. If you ask most Titans fans, they'd say, no, you got a guard. Maybe I should have made this offensive lineman as an option, but at the time, again, this was back when folks thought Paris Johnson Jr. might be available at 11. Silly and naive times.
Let's move on here to the next question. That is, the Titans 2023 offensive line should be blank. 59.8% of the vote said Nicholas Petit-Frere, signing Nate Davis, and then a new left tackle, left guard, and center. The next best option was try to keep Lewan and Jones at 26.6% of the vote.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, the third option, and the one that we are ultimately seeing them go with, was 8.4% of you voted for NPF, and then everybody else knew. At the time, folks were much higher on Davis, and I think much more sure of themselves that Davis would be around. I remember at the time the thinking being, okay, so they'll bring back Nate Davis, but Ben Jones may retire, and Taylor Lewan, I doubt that they are going to bring him back, whether he retires or not. They'll probably cut him. Oh, how wrong we were. They cut Lewan and they cut Jones, and they cut Davis. Like, and they didn't actually cut Davis. They just didn't re-sign him, but they were actively disinterested in bringing him back at the number that the Chicago Bears ultimately gave him. I think they made the right decision, despite it not being popular 3 months ago. I think people now kind of realize, okay, I get it. I think there's some clingers still to Davis, but at that price tag, his availability alone, and as well as, spotty play, a bit up and down, not super consistent, ruled him out, in my opinion, as a guy that was worthy of that number. And just like I was not upset with John Robinson moving on from Jack Conklin at right tackle in 2019 or whatever it was, 2018, the measure of how successful this decision is only half imparted by how well Davis does in Chicago. It is also half dictated by who do you bring in to replace him. Like the issue with moving on from Jack Conklin was not that they moved on from Jack Conklin. It's that they moved on from Jack Conklin and their alternative option was not an actual option. It was an untenable choice. And so if the Titans moved on from Davis and they found, they've got four new guys in the building now who you'd think one of them could be a decent right guard, then it won't be an issue, I don't think. Even if Nate Davis goes on to be an all-pro in Chicago, it will be a bummer probably and be one of those things where the Titans are like, I guess we should have rolled the dice. But that's one of those things that I think fans will absolutely understand.
Next question here. The Titans 2023 starting wide receivers should be blank. And this was probably the closest one out of any of these polls here, with the first place being 37.2% of the vote being Burks, bring in a veteran, and Kyle Phillips.
Hey, y'all nailed it. Good job. That's what it is. Well done.
At 36.4%, right behind it is Treylon Burks, draft wide receiver, and Phillips. Not quite correct, unless you never know.
Well, they can't draft anybody right now. You mean? I gotcha. Yeah. We don't know if Mr. 7th round is going to turn into a wide receiver too, but you never know.
You never know. And then the third option that got 24.7% of the vote was Treylon Burks, new.
Yeah, so we don't know the end of the story yet. The Titans still seem interested in potentially going and trading or picking up receivers to add to this roster, but the options are limited. And as of right now, it is Burks and a veteran and Kyle Phillips as the starters on this team, whether that veteran is NWI or Cody Hollister or somebody else who I'm not thinking of. The new guy from Houston that they bring in, Chris Moore, could be that guy. He could be the 2 or the 3. So it looks like it's going to be a veteran, and I'm sure many folks would not mind clarifying their choice here. When we said veteran or draft, we meant a guy that's worthy of a wide receiver 2 designation, not a 7th rounder or a guy that no one's heard of. But alas, that's what you get when you're not specific.
Yeah, especially with this poll coming out when guys like Adam Thielen or DJ Chark was still about to hit the market. Like
Alan
these
Lazard.
Guys, yes, a lot of these guys that were still playing and were probably
not
on their
awesome
way out.
Options, but certainly options. Yeah, starting options.
Next question here. The Titans 2023 starting cornerback should be blank. The top answer here at 55.3% was Fulton, McCreary, and Molden. At 33.4% in second was Fulton, McCreary, and New. So a little bit of both, I guess. Both these.
So we won't really know the correct answer, right, until we get into camp and see how these guys are utilized. Who are going to be the de facto starters? There's a reality. I'm not sure it's the most likely situation, but there's a reality out there in which game to game, the starting cornerbacks for this team change. It's certainly, I think, always going to be Fulton and McCreary out there as long as they're healthy. But whether it's Molden that is making up the trio, or you've got Murphy Bunting, Sean Murphy Bunting in the building now, that is going to be a viable starting option, as well as Trey Avery, who I didn't consider in this poll, a guy that you would prefer to have as a depth player, but certainly somebody that they're going to try to incorporate, and a guy that could see some starting action depending on the situation. So I think that people were on the right track here. One of the two highly voted answers here is certainly going to be the case. It's going to be Fulton and McCreary and somebody, whether that's Molden, whether that's somebody new in Sean Murphy Bunting. We don't know yet, but that's going to be the situation.
Next question here is the Titans should bring back Austin Hooper in 2023 ?
Ha.
The answer that prevailed here at 48.9% of the vote was only if he's cheap. And while the Raiders did sign him to a cheap deal, the
I'm
Titans
looking up how much that was.
did not end up bringing him back, with the second place vote being still yes, just a firmly yes, 43.6%, and then no had 7.5% of the vote here.
Only 7.5% of folks were not interested at all in him coming back. For reference, he signed as a free agent this past spring to the Raiders for $2.75 million. Certainly a drop in the bucket. I think he's worth every penny there, and he's going to be a nice piece for them. I still would not have minded them. I mean, my first option was for them to let him go and spend a decent pick on a guy that could be that do it both true tight end too that we've been talking about, the guy that they're hoping Josh Wiley develops into. But if they hadn't, if you told me it was just going to be Wiley, or maybe if it is a draft pick, it's going to be a late round draft pick, I'd have brought him back, man. I don't agree with that one at all. At that price point, I think that he'd have been worth it. And I think another year in the system, he would have continued to trend upwards as he did at the end of last year. I was kind of excited to see that. But alas, he's gone. And people were, I guess, not wrong here, because this was an opinion-based question. But the vast majority of folks, because he does fall into the cheap category for sure. All but 7.5% of you were displeased with that move from the Titans, if your opinion has not changed since January.
Next question here. The Titans should bring David Long Jr. back in 2023, with 82% of the votes having a resounding yes here, 16.5% saying only if he's cheap, and then 1.6% of the vote saying no.
Yeah, it's a tough one, man. People were wanting to keep all of those guys, and that's kind of the way it is every year, right? The free agents on your team, as long as they're not, just the most hated guy by the fan base, as long as they're not Dennis Daly, they're going to be a lot of fans that want to keep them around. And I get that. You grow an allegiance, a connection to a player. With David Long, he was one of those guys that people liked to champion, and he was one of the hidden gems on the Titans roster that people were like, oh man, he's like a top 5 inside linebacker in the league, and folks just don't know about his game. Like, this dude can ball. The injuries are what did him in, and that's why Mike Vrabel and company decided that they needed to move on from him. But I think that it's very clear that with only 1.6% of folks disinterested in bringing him back, Titans fans not crazy about this decision, and one that could come back to bite them in the butt if the new plan at inside linebacker does not go to plan.
Next question here, which is the most interesting one. The Titans kicker in 2023 will be Randy Bullock with 36.7% of the vote, Caleb Shudak with 18.5% of the vote, and then New with 44.8% of the vote. And we still can't confidently say what will happen with this one.
Is this the last question that we have here?
I think we have a couple more, but
okay.
Next one here we have with the 11th question is
Malik Willis. Hang on. I did not want us to move on yet. I was just curious if this was the last one, because we can move on. I don't have a lot to say of all the questions. I think this next one is the last one. We certainly have the least understanding of this situation. This is the least answered question so far, without a doubt. JT, how do you lean? They didn't sign any UDFA kickers that I'm aware of. So they seem to want to roll with Caleb Shudak in camp. There's still time for them to add competition, but
I think you probably have to at least bring someone in. You have to bring someone in. I will say that there are some guys still on the free agent market that are obviously going to bring some value. We've seen this year that some guys have gotten some pretty insane deals being signed this year, but guys like Mason Crosby, Ryan Suckup, Robbie Gould, Zane Gonzalez, Brett Maher, if you want to forget the last 4 games of his.
Pay no attention to the last time he kicked footballs in the NFL. Yeah.
His Dallas career there. Those are all guys that are still free agents. So if you go into camp and think that
I totally
you don't have a good kicker, you might bring one of those guys in to shore up your special teams.
So Titanic says here in the chat that they actually did sign a kicker from Texas Tech as a UDFA. Thank you for the correction there. I'll hand up on the UDFAs. I'm not super up to date on exactly who the list is. On Sunday, when the UDFA madness went down Sunday afternoon, I was passed out because I had been grinding draft for the past 10 days, and it was just done, just completely dead, as I'm sure JT kind of was as well, hanging out in LaGuardia Airport trying to sleep. But I didn't pay super great attention to who they brought in. I noticed the big names. Clearly, I did not notice the kicker they brought in, but good. I'm glad that they did. That seemed kind of confusing to me. So they will have a little bit of competition there. All right, JT, let's move on to the next question.
Yeah, and this will be our final question here, which is probably the most interesting one.
Yes.
Malik Willis, ? And the 4 options here were gone before training camp, which had 4.9% of the vote.
Not happening.
Won't make the 53-man roster, which is 14.7% of the vote.
Awesome.
Third string got the majority of the vote, being 51.6% of the vote. And then second string had 28.7% of the vote.
Yeah, so I think that the majority got it right here. Third string. At the time, I'd be curious to ask all the folks, the roughly 450 folks that said he'd be a third stringer, who in their mind was going to be the second stringer. Like who did they have penciled in to usurp him? Or maybe this was just a reflection of how down they were on him after getting benched last year. Or maybe, at the time, Josh Dobbs was still on the roster. So maybe they thought it would just keep going the pecking order that we ended the season with: Tannehill, Dobbs, Willis. Either way, I think that the middle 2 options here, third stringer and won't make the 53-man roster, are collectively probably the correct choice. Maybe he makes the 53-man if they keep 2 quarterbacks, but decent chance Malik Willis is going to be a practice squad quarterback at some point this season. All right, that is going to do it for our poll update. And, depending on how things go, we may very well bring those back out in July or in August if things have really changed by then, to see just how crazy our opinions were back in January. But JT, we are done here today. Appreciate everybody joining us live. Before you go, real quick, help us out. Leave a 5-star rating and a review of whatever you'd like on our show on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your good podcasts. If you're listening to it as a podcast, we appreciate you. Certainly fun to have live listeners, but we appreciate the folks that download the show in podcast form. Make sure to rate and review. If you leave a 5-star review, we will read out whatever you wrote. We've not checked it in a little bit, JT. So before Friday's show, we'll check it to see if there are any new ones. So get yours in between now and Friday, or between now and Thursday when we record, and we will be sure to read it. And until then, just a couple of things to look forward to. We've got the schedule release we'll be talking about on Friday's show. May go live. We'll see. We'll play it by ear. Then we've got Danny Kelly at some point this week, or at the very latest next Monday. And then we're going to be talking next week and this weekend about Titans rookie minicamp, which should be exciting and should be a good time. And I'll be reporting on the ground from that. And then we'll come back and regroup and sift through what was the first glimpse we really got at these rookies on the field. So, JT, I'll talk to you on Friday's show. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. Hope you have a great week.